I'm happy to be I'm happy to be here with you all. I am Jennifer Beck. I'm the Talent Development Manager for the Colorado Rural Workforce Consortium. We are a state-funded employment agency through the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. So I've been in this role for about 16 years, leading up. I didn't start as the manager, however, leading up, building in that way. Kathy had invited us to spend a little bit of time with you guys talking about interviewing skills, right? So last week we delved into the world of resume writing and hit some high points, and I'd like to do the same thing with our time today. So for today's session, we're going to take the next, maybe 30 minutes to an hour um, to talk a little bit about interviewing. And there's a few key learning points that I want you all to be aware of, right? When we're approaching interviews, we want to make sure that we have researched and prepared for the interview. We want to make sure to dress to impress, showcase our skills, make sure we're answering with confidence, and then, of course, ask smart questions as we'll be allowed an opportunity to expand throughout the interview. Last, and one that gets commonly skipped over, is follow up and thank yous, right? A lot of times we think that once the interview is complete, we're off the hook. We can breathe again, and now we're just waiting to hear back, okay? So during our time today, we're going to take a few minutes in each section just to kind of get you guys fully prepared um, to approach any interview with confidence and to feel like you know what you're stepping into. So as we begin talking about like our first step, our first learning point, right? So research and preparation. This is one of the things that many job seekers kind of take for granted. This is something that when we are reviewing which jobs we want to apply for, we're taking the time, we're out there looking up any job leads that we can, either online, in person, through publications or social media. And when we see those, we get engaged and we start reading through the job descriptions. As we are catering or customizing our resume to those job descriptions, it's part of the practice and what we learned last week. Take the job description and pull out keywords to show and highlight how you would be a good fit in this role. Many times by the time it's you've now landed a job interview, they've called, you set up a time, people think their research is done. Now they need to just worry about what they're going to wear, show up on time, and they're good to go. And actually, the research goes way beyond that. So one of the key fundamentals, what I had started to elaborate on, is that job description. Before you enter into your interview and as you're preparing, review the job description. Read for key points. If there are what we refer to sometimes as soft skills, so if they use words like hardworking, strong work ethic, punctual, dependable, regularly throughout the job description, that is cueing you into the company culture, that those words, those repetitive words are points and characteristics that they like to observe and see in their staff. So you want to hone in on those soft skills and also any hard skills. You can also use the company website as a whole. I would very much recommend, if you're familiar with surfing on the different websites, about us or mission and value statements. All of those things are going to cue you in a little bit more to what the company is looking for, the culture that they're trying to establish, what's their primary interest, and also the verbiage that they tend to use. So how do they speak? What are key points that resonate a lot with them? Say, for example, if in their mission and values sections, you're seeing words like safety, for the safety of our staff, for the safety of our patrons, that's something that tells you, okay, this company is going to incorporate a lot of those opportunities to not only provide their service or product, but also in a safe way. So there may be, where they're prioritizing risks to their employees, and on the other side, right, they want to minimize the risks. And those are things that you want to be aware of, right? A lot of people forget to look at for one, the job description, and then tying it back to a mission, vision, and about us section. So those are part of the key research components that you want to utilize when you're preparing for your interview. It goes a little past that, right? If it's a local employer and you would like to get a better understanding of what is it like to work for this employer, what is it like to work at this company, what is the role of, you have an opportunity as well, because we're in small communities, to leverage any peer-to-peer conversations that you could have. So in other words, if you know people that work there, if you've had an opportunity to meet or interact with people that work there, if it's there on site and you just want to go in, if there's a reason, say it's a retail place, you can go in and maybe go in with the understanding that you will potentially have an interview there. Look for certain things like their uniforms, um, if they wear like a name tag, if there's certain things that are pretty common across the board. Sometimes for us ladies, you know, the long hair and stuff, if they tie it back or not. All of these things can be cues for you to know what to expect during the interview and what to expect from this employer. So if you're going in from a point that's just very curious, right? Just go in and observe, you know, see what seems to be important. What are reoccurring instances that happen while you're there on site or as you're talking to somebody that already works there? Okay, don't underestimate the power of even those simple observations and simple conversations. You know, what should I know? What's very important to the company? What are some things that, you know, are big no-nos for this employer? You know, it doesn't have to be a long or lengthy conversation, but it's all part of the initial research. When we are preparing for a job interview, right? One of the next steps that we start thinking about, what am I going to wear? How do I go in, right? It's very natural for us as humans to just be like, I don't know, you know, I'm seeing some of this material that tells me that I should go business formal or business casual. I don't own a blazer. Do I really need to wear that when I go in for a job interview, right? These are all very natural occurrences, and this is something I want to take just one moment to kind of stop and highlight and encourage with each and every one of you. When we're preparing for an interview, if it is in person, if it is virtual, or even if it's a mock interview, a practice interview, a fake interview, if you will, we are humans. We are going to have and can anticipate some very human-like natural responses to this situation, okay? You may start experiencing, even at a mock interview, where your heart starts racing because you're sitting there, you thought this was no big deal. You picked out an outfit that you're trying to practice in and just make sure you're comfortable in. You've done your research and you even know some of the answers that you want to provide. And even in a mock interview setting, you're sitting there and you know that they're getting ready to call your name and your heart starts beating faster. And you find yourself fidgeting in your chair, or you're standing there and you find yourself wringing your hands. You know, all of these things are very natural human responses. So when people talk about like nailing the job interview, I want you guys to remember that practicing these behaviors, this is a learned skill. So even when you practice in the mirror at home, or you know, with a colleague, a peer, or at like in the school setting, kind of a bit of a plug here for the workforce centers. We have a group of virtual career coaches that can also help practice mock interviewing. So if it's too weird to practice that with somebody you know and ask them to interview you, you can leverage the services of the workforce center and set up a virtual interview at no cost. To get that practice in, and then you'd also get some focused feedback from the mock interview. So I just want to make sure that you guys all know that that is a possibility. But even if you're practicing in the mirror on your own, when you try and sound like what the videos sometimes show or what you've seen in movies, or these practiced responses, you know, they can become very unnatural very quickly, right? And we start getting tongue-tied and we start, I didn't mean to say it in that way, right? It's important to know this happens to everybody, okay? So some very easy things to do: the preparation of, practice, and then breathing. You know, if we have an opportunity to choose, are we going to kind of get carried away with this? Are we going to let our heart rates go out of control? Are we going to do some deep breathing? Practicing just calming our heart rate down so that we can go in and be the demonstrate, our strengths and our skills. Okay. So before we get too far into any further discussion, I wanted to make sure that we stop on that, because that is one thing that as you continue to do interviews and job search, interacting and follow-ups, all of those things, until they become a learned practice and habit, you can anticipate those reactions, and just know that with some very fundamental practices to regulating, so some deep breathing. Sometimes it's very simple. I'm going to take a step back. You can put your hand on your heart while you take a few deep breaths, and all of these things are going to help you recenter where you're at. When we're talking about what to wear to an interview, there are some key phrases that I find to be very helpful. So if you like to research things online or do a quick Google search, business casual and business smart are very interchangeable in today's industries, right? In today's the whole work search and job interviewing world. So again, that's business casual and business smart. It's going to go on to explain the type of clothing that you should wear to an interview. One of the key points that I'd like to highlight is, when in doubt, just take a little slightly over. So if you go, for example, I'm going to use some of the local employers to our area. We have an amazing implement here. It's appraised of diesel mechanics, part sales, and they cater to an agricultural-based community, right? We'll never see a business suit in there in the staff, not from the manager to the mechanics. We're not going to see that. What we do see, however, even in the mechanics, is like a polo shirt with a collar and 2 buttons. Maybe it's personalized to have the company logo on the chest. And for those that don't even work in the shop, sometimes it's a button-up shirt, right? Our mechanics also do that, where they're wearing button-up shirts that are their work uniform, right? When you're going in and you're observing these type of cultures, I have a lot of young people that ask me, well, can I wear jeans? I don't own anything but jeans. This is a good opportunity to really confront what you're trying to get out of work, right? If you go into a place and you see that they have a uniform, maybe it's time to start looking at, especially if you really, really want to work there, maybe it's time to start, okay, well, I was going to buy some pants anyways, maybe I'll incorporate in a black slack if that's part of their uniform, right? Something comfortable is very much, you do want to be comfortable and not overly fidgety during your interviews. Most importantly, you want to be practicing good hygiene practices, right? So it's really important to plan and prepare your work outfit, right? If we're following the guidance of like business casual or smart casual, this could be more of a blouse. It doesn't have to be button up. It should be pressed, or at least not wrinkly. When we're talking about, likewise on the men's side, if you're wearing a polo shirt with a collar, something with a collar, even if it is a short sleeve or a button up, you want to make sure that it's pressed, right? You don't want to come in with it over wrinkly and looking unkept. So if there's an opportunity to tuck your shirt in, you should absolutely take that, right? That is one of the essential and kind of standardized practices in our culture. If you have tucked in your shirt, even that amount of effort shows some additional foresight and thought is, okay, this is a little bit more formal. I acknowledge that. What you want to avoid is overly casual clothes, like a graphic tee, band tees, anything overly revealing. When it comes to pants, we want to keep in mind if there's a need to wear a jean. If you use a dark colored jean or a solid colored jean, you should avoid things with any kind of fading or holes in them, right? Even if they are trendy, it's just not the time and place to dress in that nature. So very much keep that in mind. On the Eastern Plains and in rural Colorado, there are still a lot of different generations in the workplace. So what I mean by that is, you don't always know if you're going to be interviewed by somebody in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s or beyond. And each of those generations brings a little implication of what is allowed and know that they're not necessarily wrong, but as the generations are in the workplace, those things are a bit of a moving target. So we want to keep that in mind, knowing that we may not know who's going to interview us. One safe, kind of safe strategy that I've shared with people from very young to having a lot of experience in the workforce. If you can think of something that you may wear to, say, like church, for example, or if you have a concert that you participate in, something to that nature, just a little bit more elevated. Most importantly, again, for you to highlight is being well kept, right? And having shown that you're putting a little bit of extra effort into your image. So again, pressed, clean. One of the other big things that we kind of tend to, it is not something that we always think about. When we're going into the workplace, there is a big part of us. It's not just in what we're wearing, but also in once we've showed up and we're demonstrating, nice manners and being cognizant of others. One of the things that we don't think about a lot, like when I get ready and I want to go someplace, I love those nice calming smells, and so I get my perfume cologne, and we get going with that as well. It's something that I like. When you're going into a job interview, you should be very cognizant of the scents that you're using, okay? So if you're choosing to use a scent, please err on the side of caution and keep it very minimal, right? You don't want to overdo it. There's all sorts of different sensitivities in work environments that you're not aware of. So please be very cognizant of that. Ladies, we haven't fully talked about it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when you're using things like makeup or accessories, anything from your jewelry to nail polish to your makeup, when you're going in for a job interview, this is usually, daytime hours, and it should be a little bit more neutral, right? We want to, yes, we want to dress to impress, for a work setting. So we want to make sure and keep things pretty neutral. Don't go overboard when it comes to any of those items. Keep them pretty neutral and calm. Okay. I feel like I've kind of talked that to death. It's less important the exact outfit that you wear. So don't do things like what are the colors of the season and stuff like that. If you've, say, for example, lost a lot of weight, maybe it's time to make sure you're in an outfit that fits, right? Really, the simpler you keep it, I hate to use the term common sense, but that's kind of what I'd like for you guys to take it back to, right? There's no pre-prescribed outfit that's going to get you the job. Really, the ultimate point of putting extra effort and time into your appearance going into a job interview is for you to feel confident, for you to also know that you've been able to demonstrate you've put a little bit of preparation into this opportunity, that you value this opportunity, and that you've taken the time to research a little bit about the company so that you're aware of what you're walking into. So again, it's always better to be a little slightly overdressed without and keeping that within context, right? Let's see here. There are a lot of different understandings and a lot of different takes on jeans at an interview. Again, I'm going to bring it back to where we started this key point, this learning point at. If you go into that business and you see that everybody wears jeans throughout the day, okay, that is a risk that some are willing to take. And for example, like at the Implement, right? I've worked with them for a lot of years, and they are very, they like their team to be clean cut and approachable. And every single person there wears jeans, right? When you go in and you look at them, none of them are faded. They don't look wore out. And so that's very important. In my professional opinion, I would caution all of you to kind of try not to wear the jeans to your job interviews. If there is a uniform in place or a dress code in place, that can be part of the questions that you ask and follow up. it's so easy to cross the line when it comes to different generations in the workplace. They may really consider that to be too casual, like if you didn't care enough to dress up a little bit. And so again, I would just err on the side of caution. It's better to be slightly overdressed than underdressed. Okay, moving on. In our learning points, we wanted to talk about how we can showcase your skills, right? So one of the main things during your interview is to sell yourself naturally, right? There is a lot of pressure, and things seem to be very refined when you start going onto the internet and leveraging some of the platforms that will talk to you about how you do it right and how you do it wrong. And they give examples of what a good response sounds like and what a bad response sounds like. What's very important is that there's not a need when you go in there and you have memorized a response and it comes out so robotic that it seems unnatural, right? Because you've memorized a response. There's also a risk of kind of getting stuck, tongue-tied on your words or forgetting a portion of it because, again, we're human, and that natural, anxiety, maybe that stress, that nervousness comes in, and you may forget everything that you had memorized. And so you're really putting yourself at a risk to really lose all sight of the point you were trying to make during that response. So there is one key question that comes into play at pretty much any interview that you go to, virtual and in person. And that's when they first invite you into the room or they're first getting all their technology set up. Maybe they'll give you an overview of what it will look like, how much time we intend to spend together. One of the very first questions, once we're kind of settling in and past some of the pleasantries of the weather, would be things like, tell me about yourself. At the point when you're being asked to that question, tell me a little about yourself as people are getting settled in. On the other side of the desk, right? The interviewer, that generally is usually the first question on their list. They literally write it down as number one, tell me about yourself, right? And it's kind of a good launching point to get your interview and this conversation started. When an employer's asking you that, and you guys may have just had the most down to earth, casual interaction between the waiting room and their desk. You guys may have had even a shared joke. Things are flowing really naturally. All of that seems great. Then that question comes, and sometimes people will like automatically go into either a very formal kind of robotic response, or they'll just be like, we're still chit-chatting right now. This is still just, we're getting to know each other. It's important to understand that is part of the interview questions, right? By the time you hear that, the interview has started. The tell me about yourself, right? Even if they're still getting adjusted in their chair. So when you go to address that question, you want to keep your answers honest, succinct, and engaging, right? This is where you're going to pull on your research. When you were reviewing the job description, what were some of those key and reoccurring skills that you were seeing, soft skills and hard skills? So what I mean by soft skills, again, is like hardworking, dependable, punctual, safety oriented. What I mean by hard skills is something very specific. So for example, if this were like in the healthcare industry, we might, things that are more concrete, patient care, charting, vitals, whatever the job description is citing, okay? This is where we want to step back before we go into the interview and what caught our attention about that job description. Why did we think like, no, this is something I can do. This is something that I'd like to do. This is something I've either trained to do or have transferable skills in. And that's what we want to highlight. So the tell me about yourself answer sometimes does get very robotic and standardized. I am here to tell you that is not the best strategy when you're going into an interview and answering those questions, okay? I would advise you to practice what you're wanting to say. There are some fundamental truths to who you are as an individual. What are your strengths that piqued your interest into this job, that made you decide you wanted to take the time to apply, that when they called and offered you an interview, that you accepted and put yourself through all of this to begin with, right? Because it can be a little nerve-wracking. So bring it back again to the fundamentals. In review of the job description, highlight some of those key phrases and why you think you'd be a good fit for them, and also why you think they're a good fit for you, okay? I'm sorry, you guys, my dogs are freaking out in the backyard and I can hear them. So I apologize. They got me a little off track there, but I think a squirrel might have gotten back there or something. Okay, so the very next thing I'd like to jump into, I don't want to go overboard in telling you all of the questions that are going to be asked during an interview because it never happens that way. And when we overly plan to that, we can get caught in the same way of like when we're memorizing, how then that affects us when we lose our center or when nerves get the better of us, which happen because we are human. What happens next, right? And sometimes it can be very overwhelming and we can find ourselves getting very nervous. What I would like to do is talk specifically about an interview question that seems to stump people regularly, right? I've had an opportunity through my job coaching and through my role to participate in many mock interviews, to be invited to interview panels, and additionally, in hiring, when we're hiring our staff. Um, Asking that question of what is your greatest weakness, and hearing the different answers from clients. Again, it can be from practicing the mock interviews to being part of interview panels, or even for our own recruitments. It is very common to watch people get a little stumped up on that, what is the greatest weakness? And similar to tell me about yourself, it goes either one way or the other. Either it's very overly memorized and it seems kind of phony sometimes. It seems robotic, or seems like this is what they think that they're supposed to say. Or sometimes it just catches people off guard, and when in stress, you go back to what you know. And in those moments of stress, the things that people will choose to say, when they're asked, what is your greatest weakness? So I have a little video, Kathy, and I'd like for us to give it a go here. So if it doesn't work, we'll cover what the main highlights, but let's try and see if we can't get this working correctly. Okay, here we go.
Hey, my name is Gene. I'm a senior manager in Insights, and I'm here to help you crack the
Apologize, I got some buffering going on. Bear with me. I'm gonna try and stop my video sharing to see if the movie or the video will play. Kathy, I'm starting to think it's me. I really do. Let me one more try, you guys. Thank you for that, Grace. Let me just try one more time to get it going because it's really a great content. Kathy, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it going, and I apologize to the group. I know the key points. Just know that the video that I had prepared, it just wraps it up so cleanly. Okay, so thank you guys for your patience. When you are practicing that question of what is your greatest weakness, we want to make sure to, very similar to tell me about yourself, have an honest response prepared, something that's a little succinct and can be engaging. When we talk about our greatest weakness, one of the key elements that we want to highlight is something that we may have identified as a weakness, right? This is a practice in our own self-awareness. But additionally, what have we done to enhance our skills and close that gap on the weakness, right? So say, for example, it's something like organization, right? Like I struggle with time management, because of which I find myself overcommitting and saying yes. What I have learned is to utilize some time blocking within my schedule to allow time. And when there is no time, it's easier for me to say no when I need to, so that I can ensure I do my best on the job and on this project, right? So yes, we're highlighting areas in which we've identified, okay, this may be a potential weakness. However, in knowing myself, these are the steps that I use to ensure that I can build upon those and that I can close the gaps and turn those weaknesses into practiced strengths, right? The habits that we form in implementing those kind of strategies go well beyond the interview and will help you throughout your entire career. So know when an employer is asking you about your greatest weakness, they want to see how you're going to handle that question. They're interpreting your body language and not only what you say, but they're also trying to figure out what you do in those situations where you've seen some gaps or a weakness that it has been brought to your attention before. How do you handle that focus feedback, or others may call it constructive criticism? If that's something that's been talked to you about previously, either through some volunteerism, in a classroom or at a previous job, don't be afraid to address it. Just know that you're not trying to eliminate yourself, right, from this opportunity. So if that key strength was something that was or key weakness of yours is something that was reoccurring in the job description, and that kind of makes you be like, oh gosh, okay, let's just basics, right? Being punctual, right? If an employer is reiterating that several times throughout their job descriptions, you know it's important, right? So if that's something that you in the past have struggled with, you can use that if you have had an opportunity to build the habits to correct that behavior. If you haven't taken the time to do something like that, to identify, I need some additional support, what can I do to increase my punctuality, right? Again, we want to be honest and succinct. We want to be engaging. So if we feel that that might completely eliminate us from this opportunity because it was reiterated several times in the job excuse me, in the job description, and it's something that we haven't built our skills on, that's maybe something to practice now that you've identified that as a weakness, but it also would be something I would caution you on citing during your interview, okay? If you don't have a solution that you're working towards on those weaknesses, that can be one of those questions that just really, your nerves may get the better of you and will completely derail your interview. That kind of leads us into the next key point of answering with confidence, okay? We don't know what we're going to be asked during the interview. Yes, we can practice. We can research what are some of the 5 main interview questions. What's happening and we're seeing as a culture more and more is that interviewing techniques are changing, right? So now we're seeing more questions that are more around like behavioral interviewing. Um, they are asking for, they give you a long, it's not a yes or no, do you know this or that? It's give me a situation in where you and where your team wasn't functioning well. Identify your role and tell me how you contributed to making your team more successful, right? So these are more along the lines of behavioral questions. When we are getting ready for an interview, if we can anticipate those type of questions are going to be asked more and more as a culture, we're shifting towards asking more of those type of questions and incorporating them in, where maybe it was once or twice in an interview. Now there may be reoccurring behavioral questions, right? Where we need to be prepared with situations on how things possibly went well and how things possibly didn't. What happens when we're trying to describe something, right? And we're talking about, that one person on the team that just made it impossible. Like there were just so many opportunities that they had to come together as a team that made it more difficult because they chose not to communicate. They weren't hitting their timelines. We couldn't depend on them, right? We've all either had an opportunity to work with somebody like that, or maybe at times in our lives we were that person, right? When they ask a behavioral question, this is an opportunity for us to know that we might not always say the right thing. There might be times when phrases slip out of your mouth that you did not intend to say, right? You didn't want to go in there talking about your previous manager or supervisor. You hadn't intend to go in there being judgmental, talking about a peer or coworker that left you high and dry, right? But as part of those frustrations, we are human, and that stuff sometimes can come out of our mouths. Again, I would encourage you to practice. Take the person out. The behavior comes in, right? So when you're highlighting, you don't say necessarily a name or a title. What you can say is something similar to like, well, a coworker or a person on that project that was helping on that project, and then focus on the behavior, not on the person, right? So if it wasn't hitting their timelines, wasn't showing up, um, they were entrusted with a portion of this project and then they came empty-handed, right? Really focus on what happened, the behavior that made it a difficult or positive situation. And then focus back to what you did in order to get productivity moving forward again. In school, in life, and at work, these situations happen where we may be off of our timelines. There may be setbacks, and that is okay. It's most important to emphasize that you realize that is part of life. And how do we move forward? What steps did you take in moving things forward, right? When you are answering not only behavioral questions, but just throughout your interview, there may be times when you need a moment, right? You may be still caught up on a phrase that you used in the previous answer, and you saw a shift in body language come across the desk or the screen, and you're feeling a little unconfident or unsure about that. We want to go back to our basics of breathing. We can breathe. We can always ask for a minute. Like that's a good question. Just a second. I want to make sure I think this out. Can I have just a moment? Employers are absolutely okay with that. There's also a technique, which is like rephrasing. You can ask for them to rephrase the question. Like, okay, I want to make sure I understood what you're asking. Can you rephrase that question for me? And this is going to kind of help you get a better understanding of what the key points in that question were. Lastly, sometimes it's just reflective listening. And what I mean by that is, say they ask you a question, then you repeat back you understood, right? If I'm asked, oh, that's a big question. Let me make sure I understood that correctly. You want me to identify a time that I had, or that I had problems working in a team, what I did about it, and how I utilized my role to improve that situation. Is that correct? And you can reiterate with reflective listening. Any of those strategies, from asking to rephrase, asking for a minute, or the reflective listening, also buys you some time, right? It also, in a very natural way, gives you a few moments to think about what you're going to say and how you're going to answer this question. We are human. It's absolutely okay to miss points throughout your interview. And as a matter of fact, it happens to the best of us. Key elements that were super important through your research you knew that would really resonate with this employer and give you an added benefit. There may be times, or based on the questions, where you're just not able to work it in there correctly, or you moved past it in a way that didn't allow you to double back in a kind of organic, natural way, and you're kind of uncomfortable. It may feel a little awkward to bring it back up. Know that you always have an opportunity to do that. At the end of interviews, you're going to get a question that can sound something like, okay, now you're off of the hot seat and it's time for us to be in the hot seat. What questions do you have for us? They may say, um, okay, well, I think I've heard everything that I need. Is there anything you need from me? Right? Any level of those questions, any variation of those questions are a great opportunity. If you miss something that you had intended to highlight or clarify, that's a segue. Similar to tell me about yourself, you have an opportunity to say, I would like to double back. You asked about XYZ, and I did have a circumstance I wanted to tell you about there. So then you can provide some of that clarifying information and double back to your high points, right? When they ask you about your next steps, there's also a human inclination, and I've seen it over and over again, and I just want to address it right now. Many times we jump the gun, right? We're excited. We want this job. Next most important thing, how much are you going to pay me, right? What is the salary for this? If an employer specifically asks you about what is your expected salary or what is your expected pay for this role, I would highly advise you guys not to answer that or engage overly during an interview in that question. The key time to negotiate salary is after you have been offered a job. So again, no time before that is it appropriate to start giving expectations of what your salary is, or if they even ask you during an interview. One way to get around that question, of course, is having had done your research in the job description to cite the salary as listed in the job description. Or you can take it back to them and say, well, based on, some of my key qualifiers that I've seen, I'd welcome the opportunity to talk about this further, maybe at the point of, when you offer a job, or at that next step, we can get into those details a little more. But in the meantime, it does not serve anybody involved to kind of jump the gun and try and have those discussions ahead of time. Let's see here. Once you have survived your interview, right? Now it's time to take a deep breath. You've gone through it all. You've practiced, you've prepared, you've planned your outfit. You've highlighted your key accomplishments and skills during the interview. You've used that opportunity to talk about your weakness and show your future employer or this company how you use that self-awareness and build a stronger you, in service of productivity and outcomes, right? You've done all of those things. Throughout the interview, you've recentered by asking some specific questions around, reflective listening and or um, clarifying questions to buy yourself time when you ever felt things kind of just were going off of the tracks, right? And you've gotten yourself calmed down. When an employer asks, do you have any additional questions for me? You want to be prepared. This is part of the preparedness, right? This shows and demonstrates to the employer that you are trying to wrap your brain around what it would be like to have that job. It's uncommon for a client or for an employee, a future employee or job seeker that really wants the job to not have any questions. If they're just kind of throwing out a net and casting a net and will accept any job offer, those are usually the circumstances where you don't have any follow-up questions. And I want you guys to hear it, right? An employer's not looking for somebody that's going to just come and occupy space. They want to see that you are there during those work hours to be part of that team, right? We spend more of our waking hours with our coworkers than sometimes our own families. So how do you see yourself in that role? Some additional follow-up questions can be asking about what are the next steps during that time. You want to make sure and highlight if they give a time frame like a week, 2 weeks. This gives you an opportunity to know when to do your follow-ups. Okay. A follow-up is something that is very important in our local labor market. Okay, we are in a time where we have so many different generations in the workforce. There are some hiring managers, onboarding agencies that state that if you don't do a follow-up, they don't even move you forward to the next step, right? So they don't keep you on the pile of the list of the yes to be hired. So what that follow-up can look like, um, you want to, if it's a virtual interview, generally there's email addresses tied to the invite. I would advise you to capture those, okay? If it's in person, it's absolutely okay to ask for a card or the names of the people that have conducted your interview with you. There was a time when people were like, I don't want to send an email that's too casual, that's informal. It's no longer that way. As a matter of fact, a speedy follow-up is a good practice. So the quicker you can do a follow-up is for the best, and sometimes can be what puts you over the edge and the top of the higher list. So a thank you, if there were takeaways in some of the explanations of the interview panel, if it was the time, if they helped you feel comfortable when they invited you into their office, if there's anything that they've done, you want to make that a little bit specific to each person, right? We very commonly see people push out follow-ups and thank you notes, and it's a generic blast. In that case, it's similar to what we've been talking about throughout this hour, right? When things are overly prescribed, overly generic, and or seem robotic, they just don't seem genuine, right? So you want to make sure that you're distinguishing that you actually took some time and interest and some takeaways. Just as they're observing you, you were observing them, and highlight some of those key points in a thank you. The videos that I had planned on sharing today, they are from a platform that we utilize through the workforce centers. It's LinkedIn Learning. I wanted you guys to know that there's some great content in LinkedIn Learning and even some a specific, when it comes to interviews, a specific course that was where I was going to pull my two highlights off of, but it goes well in depth on how to handle different questions. It'll give you some they're scripted in practice, so of course they're, keep in mind they look very polished, right? But they're going to give you some examples of how a person used these tips and strategies to having a really quality answer in their interview and why it was a quality answer. And so again, it's not about memorizing what other people are saying, but it is examples on how they did the things that we were talking about. So if you're interested, Kathy also has some flyers for our virtual coaching collaborative. There in Fort Morgan, we have a workforce center based on the time, right? A lot of times they need to schedule appointments with you to do things like mock interviewing. So based on if you'd like that in person Or if you would be comfortable with a virtual career coach walking you through the steps of a mock interview, doing that with you and then providing focused feedback, that is a wonderful resource, right? I'd like to not only highlight those, so Kathy will have some virtual coaching core flyers. They're very easy to engage and schedule with. Invite you to, seek out your local workforce center where you can go and get registered with them, get job leads, and practice any of these type of things that are related to getting a job, keeping a job, stabilizing your income. But also that LinkedIn Learning. Once you're registered with us, we have an opportunity to issue you a license to LinkedIn Learning. Right now, we're in the process of renewing those licenses, so it's about a 30-day trial. But there's some great content in there that can help you not only build your skills, many of those sessions and courses will have quizzes. Once you've completed the quiz, you can earn a certificate. And that's something that you can either print and keep in your employment portfolio, or you can add to your LinkedIn Learning account if you have one, and use that to kind of advertise yourself and your qualifications on social media. For now, Kathy, that is all I had this morning. And I again apologize that I cannot seem to get these videos figured out, but I do want to thank you guys for your time and open up the floor for any questions if there are some.
Questions. That was a great segue though, because we have one more workshop on Wednesday. That one will be short. And it's with Ariella Gonzalez Bondi, the Director of Marketing and Communications. She'll be talking about LinkedIn. And so that's a great segue for the subscription you can get through Workforce Development. Because they have a whole learning side. They also have the networking side, and that's what Ariella is going to be talking about, followed by professional headshots for you, and we'll send them to you on email for your profile on LinkedIn. So again, thank you, Jennifer Beck. We so appreciate your time for both of the workshops you've done for us.
You're welcome, Kathy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.